everybody, and welcome. Thank you for joining us here on TechNow. This is episode 80. Hard to believe we've done 80 episodes already. It's crazy. This one is on one of our new shiny features in Paris. This is all about the process automation designer. I almost flipped the two around. Next month is Playbook. So that's why this is part one. It is one of a two-part series, and we thank you for joining us. Hope you can come back on November 17th for that, but we'll give you a reminder at the very end of that. Real quick, your valuable time. If you haven't met us before, my name is Chuck Tomasi. I'm from ServiceNow, been here for about 10 and a half years and was a customer for a couple before that. I love building custom applications on the platform. Integrations are my thing as well. And I spent some time in the community, do lots of videos like this and many others. Thank you, everybody who's watched those, and more to come. Without more delay, let's turn it over to Craig Stepp for his introduction.
Yes, and I've been at ServiceNow for about 6 years. I was not a customer, unfortunately, ahead of time, but looking back on it, I wish I was, because I could have used ServiceNow in a lot of situations back in the day. But I've been hosting this with Chuck for a long time. I forget how many episodes I've actually been on now, but I do a lot of...
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like 200. No. I've done a lot of cloud stuff at ServiceNow, as well as a lot of orchestration. So in the past, and that's where my interests lie. And I'll turn it over to Yaron.
Hi there, my name is Yaron Gez. I'm a manager in platform engineering. I've been with the company for about 3 years. And prior to leading the Playbook experience team, I was working on the agent workspace as an engineer. Before joining ServiceNow, I was a co-founder at a data security startup. I've also worked in health and financial industries. And when I'm not coding or leading a great team of coders rather, I play a lot of piano, singing, songwriting, gardening, hiking, camping, and cooking. Very happy to be here, Chuck, and thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I love having the subject matter experts on because they sound way better at whatever we're discussing than I do. We are going to be talking about process automation designer. Actually, when I say we, I mean Yaron's going to be covering all that good stuff. We'll add some colorful commentary, and if you've got questions, we'll pull them from the Q&A. If we don't get to your question during the show, we apologize ahead of time. There are usually more questions there than we have time to answer. We will get those offline and post those back to the community, and even send you a notification with a link right to your question and our answer, so you can come back and see that. If you post multiples, yes, you only get one email. We were very smart about that. Also going through this, want to remind you one more time, we do have a podcast that was launched in August of 2020 called Breakpoint. Very happy about that. And shortly after our webinar here is done, we will be recording a follow-up discussion with Yaron about Process Automation Designer and Playbook. So you'll want to subscribe to that podcast and find out what we say that didn't get said here, that or if you do have other topics in mind, please let us know. We interview product managers and customers and special guests, and oh boy, we've got topics lined out well into 2021. Lots of ideas, but we're always open for more. So if you've got ideas, let me know. This is the podcast for you. Audio, so there's no PowerPoints, no demos, no update sets. I think I'm going to use that as a tagline for an audio podcast someday.
We should all, there's a lot of meetings that could go with a lot of less of that. So, yeah.
We're going to try and get through the PowerPoint on this, but we do have a demo because this is video and we want to share that with you. Developer.servicenow.com is where you can go if you want to learn more about and work with, play with, test, learn about Process Automation Designer, Playbook, a number of other features that are on the platform. You can get a Paris release totally free that runs all this stuff. Turn on plugins, do whatever you want, risk-free from your organization. This is your sandbox. If you mess it up, like I frequently do, blast it and start over. It's kind of a fun process to go, I Z-booted, that's what we call it, Z-boot the instance and wipe the slate clean. Go over to developer.servicenow.com, not just for the free PDI, but also for the API docs, examples, learning plans, the resource. If you're getting into the Now Experience components, the whole reference library is over there. Great place to get started and go. So I am pleased as punch to turn it over to Yaron at this point.
Great. Thanks, Chuck. So this is part one. This is a two-parter. We're going to come back next month. This overview is on Process Automation Designer and Playbook. Today, we're just going to focus on Process Automation Designer, but we're going to touch a little bit on Playbook as well. So just some legalese to get out of the way. In case anyone feels like taking a nap. This is just our standard safe harbor notice. Everything that we show here, anything that's coming is not a promise. Things can change and so forth and so on. So the great Bill McDermott has said, behind every great experience is a great workflow. And that fundamental principle is what's behind Process Automation Designer and Playbook Experience. Now, these are fundamentally two different products. However, they work together extremely well. Process Automation Designer, which we're going to focus on today, is a no-code designer for authoring cross-enterprise workflows in a single unified process. It's a builder, lets you build processes. Those processes can run totally independently. However, Playbook Experience is a UI platform for viewing and interacting with business process workflows in real time. You can think of it as a UI layer on top of any business workflow that allows two-way interaction and real-time updates. When you put these together, you get a really great system that allows process owners to build processes and agents to interact with them in real time. But today, as I mentioned, we're going to focus on Process Automation Designer, or as we lovingly refer to it as PAD for short. So what is the problem that we're trying to solve here? Well, the fact is it requires too much ServiceNow developer expertise to connect multiple processes and services across the enterprise. It's tough to organize. You require a developer to connect these different disparate services together. Once they're created, it's really tough to modify. You end up having to copy and change, and you can't tweak them on your own. You often have to bring in a developer again. And once those processes are running, it's tough to see. There's a lack of visibility across all the nested relationships between these services. And this is exemplified well in this next example, say, simple services within ServiceNow. That's our bread and butter. VPN requests, payroll requests, facilities requests, relatively easy to design on the platform. However, often these processes spin off other processes. For example, set up office for employee involves ordering a desk, requesting a phone setup, getting accessories. This branches off even further. Getting a desk requires getting something from the warehouse, assembling it, transporting it. Little by little, your process branches off until you have a really complicated set of the dependencies that's hard to organize, hard to see. Process Automation Designer layers on top of all this, breaks these different pieces into lanes across the enterprise to make it more of an effortless experience for you to connect your different services. So the product vision is what you see here. It's a way to provide business process owners a builder to digitize, visualize, and manage end-to-end workflows across business services. So what do you see here? Well, at the top level, there's a process. That process is broken down into lanes, kind of a Kanban style overview. Within lanes, you have activities. Activities are the actual pieces of the process that do the actual work. Now, each of these activities behind the scenes is powered by Flow Designer. So if you're familiar with Flow Designer, you're halfway there. Flow Designer is what does all the heavy lifting. And you can think of these activities as a very user-friendly encapsulation of what that flow is doing behind the scenes. It exposes just what's needed for the process owner, a low-code, citizen developer, to do their job without having to know the nuts and bolts of what's happening behind the scenes. This is a good time to go over who are the different folks involved, the roles involved in process automation. Well, you start with the developer. The developer is going to be working in Flow Designer, working on flows, flow actions, and activity definitions within PAD. Each of these activities that you see here are instances of an activity definition. So a developer is going to be building those activity definitions using Flow Designer in order to automate individual pieces of the business process. Once those activity definitions are created, the process owner can work within Process Automation Designer to build processes in order to organize the pieces of the business process into a cross-enterprise workflow. So they will use the activity definitions that the developer has provided to build these automated processes. Next, you have a workspace admin, which might not necessarily be a workspace admin, could also be an admin for any type of user experience. They're going to work with Playbook experience to work on playbooks. This is in order to configure the appropriate views of the business process for the right users. Again, next month, we're going to do much more of a deep dive into Playbook, but it allows you a lot of granularity to control exactly what that user experience is and how different users, different roles can experience the same process in different ways. That's where that Playbook experience admin or a workspace admin would do that configuration. Finally, you have the agent. The agent is the one who's actually working, most likely an agent workspace in Paris release, but in the future, playbooks can go anywhere. Anyone who's actually consuming that playbook. They're going to be working on the activities that are shown in playbook cards in order to complete the individual tasks within the business process. So the business process can involve automated tasks, and it can also involve manual tasks that an agent has to perform. So that's enough of the high-level overview, the problems that we're trying to solve in our strategy. From here, I'm going to jump right into the demo to really show some of the nuts and bolts of how this works. Now, for the sake of this demo, we're going to be using some demo tables that were created by an upcoming CreatorCon lab called Elevate Your Process Design by Building Cross-Enterprise Workflows. We'll give some more details about this at the end of the presentation, but if you're interested in anything that you see here today and you want to really get more of a hands-on experience and build some of this yourself, I highly recommend that you participate in that lab. Now, that lab creates a set of tables under this application called Improve Work. Pretty straightforward. You have an issue table where employees can file issues about things that come up on the job, and then a task table that's attached to those issues to actually work on the issue at hand. And it also comes with a workspace experience called Improve Work, just to see that in action. Now, process automation is under a new heading here called Process Automation. First thing you'll notice is that Flow Designer has been moved under here as well. So we have Flow Designer, we have Process Automation Designer, we have Flow Administration, and we have Process Automation Administration. Under the administration side, you can see active processes, today's executions, activity definitions, trigger definitions. But we're going to start with the actual designer itself. And this is my local instance running Paris. Now, when you launch Pad, you'll see any of the process definitions that have already been built, but you can also go ahead and create a new one. Creating a new one is simple. You give it a name, a description, an application. You can choose an existing trigger or create a new one. Triggers are either when a record is created, a record is updated, or either or. If you choose one of these, you then map it to a table. In this case, pick any table. When a record's created, you can narrow this down based on conditions. Something anyone who's worked with Flow Designer or business roles, it's all very straightforward. For the sake of the demo, though, we're going to work with this demo process definition that came with the Improve Work Lab. Now, when you open it up, you'll see this is our modern UI built on the same technology that's powering Agent Workspace. You'll see that our different stages of our process are broken down into lanes. They can be stages of the process. They can be areas of the organization. It's really up to you how you want to build it. Each of these lanes, in addition to having a label and a description, can have a start condition, or rather a when to start. This is similar to anyone who's worked with a PowerPoint animation. You can fire it off immediately as soon as the process starts, after the previous lane finishes, or with previous. This gives you a lot of flexibility to have lanes running in parallel. You can have the first lane and the third lane fire off at the same time when the process starts, and the second one waits for the first, because the fact is processes aren't always linear. So we allow that level of flexibility. Lanes can be moved. You can insert lanes before and after, anything you kind of expect from this sort of environment. Now, the activities within the lane, those are represented as these cards, and they're the things that do the actual functionality. Now, you'll notice that they're color-coded and categorized here, instructional and record. These are largely to do with the activity experience, the way the activity is experienced. So we're going to dive more into that next month. But the thing to keep in mind is that because these activities are powered by flows, And flows are essentially a black box. You can't see what's going on inside them, at least a process owner can't. They can do anything and everything. So we needed some way to categorize them, some way to give some experience contract as to how these should be displayed, rendered in the front end. And that's where these experience types come from. So if we look into one of these, for example, in the analysis lane, we have an introduction. When you pull this up, you'll see it has the same when to start configuration. So you have that same flexibility in terms of having things fire off immediately after previous with previous. But a lot of the power comes from under this configure activity section. This is going to open up a modal. First thing to notice here is the activity definition. So as I mentioned, these activities are instances of activity definitions. In this case, it's an instance of the instruction activity definition. This is our most basic activity definition. It just provides some input, or rather some output to a user, telling them to do something. Anytime you open up one of these activity definitions, you can see a little bit more about it, including the description, what table it is designed to be fired off of. The table that you see in the top of activity definition is the input table, the record that fires off the process. So if you want certain activity definitions to only work in processes for certain tables, you can do that. Below that, you see the automation plan. This is the flow or flow action that's doing the actual work. Whatever flow or flow action you choose, that flow or flow action has inputs, and those inputs are what is shown to the process owner. So if I jump back over to this activity configuration panel, you can see the inputs here are a message and a wait for user input toggle. They come from the flow that's powering it. So you can build all of your complicated logic in a flow and expose just the things that you want the process owner to see and worry about as inputs. Now, these inputs can be hard-coded text, like you see here, but you also have this powerful pill picker tool. If you've used Flow Designer, you're very familiar with the pill picker. It lets you insert dynamic anything. Now you can see here activities, which is grayed out, allows you to reference any prior activities that ran before this activity. And you can access any of its outputs that it has generated. But you also have access to context, which is the parent context, the process itself, what its state is, or in this case, what input record fired it off. So say, for example, we want to include the record number in this description. Well, we can dive deeper into here, filter by number, and add that. And all of a sudden, this message, which is giving the user some information, has the record number there as well. In addition, you have a wait for user input toggle. This is just basically whether you want the user to click mark complete or skipped whenever they've done whatever the step that they're being asked to do is, whatever this manual process is. You can optionally set this to no, and it will just move on to the next activity automatically. The next activity we see in this lane, fill issue type. This is an example of a very common scenario, which is the activity definition wait for condition. This is powered directly by the flow action wait for condition. Everything in ServiceNow tends to be a record. Records tend to have some conditions before they're considered quote unquote done. So in this case, you get to define, using the condition builder here, what is the definition of done for this activity. So you can see this pill picker again. We're tied to the issue that kicked this process off, the actual IW issue, and we're adding a condition on it to say let's wait until the issue type is assigned. So here are the issues that it can be. As soon as a agent or anyone working on this issue assigns an issue type, this activity is done, and it will move on to the next one. You can see here an example of the pill picker in use again to pick that parent record that fired the playbook off or the process off. Now, another thing to keep in mind across all these activities is every activity, for the most part, pretty much every activity will always have what we call an associated record. That's a record that is associated with whatever that task that needs to get done. And I'm using the term task loosely, not necessarily the task table. Again, this is ServiceNow. A record is the unit of truth. We want this to be totally decoupled. It doesn't depend on Playbook to complete this process. It doesn't depend on anything. So all these records that are waiting on, you could update them directly using the platform UI, using workspace, using mobile, and it will just move forward. And we'll show where you can find those records in a bit. Now, in the next stage, under remediation, we have an example of a automated create record activity definition. Anytime you see an activity definition that is prefixed with automated, it means just that. There's no agent interaction. As soon as this activity fires, it's going to do its work, it's going to complete, move on to the next one. So create record, it doesn't require the user to provide some input into what record they want to create or what fields. It's automated. In this case, we are creating a task, an IW task, and we're going to attach it to the IW issue, the parent issue. So you can see the pill picker was used to form this association with the parent issue. The pill picker was used again to populate the short description, please remediate or issue, and so forth. And we assigned it to good old Able Tutor just to work on this. This is another wait for condition. This is a little different because we're not waiting on the parent record. Now we're waiting on the record that came right before it in that last automated step. So here you can see the activities section is no longer grayed out. We can see all previous activities that ran before it, and we can dive into the automated create record, see all of its outputs, see its record, and map it to that record. So when that record has a state that is closed complete, closed incomplete, or closed skipped, this task is also done. Wait for closed notes, that's just going to be another wait for condition on the issue. Inform requester is another instructional card. The last one that's different is an automated update record. Similar to automated create, it will automatically update. In this case, set that work issue to close complete. Set the work notes to task closed after informing requester. So how does this all look? Now that we see how this is built, how does the user interact with it? Now, that's the primary interface, as I mentioned, is Playbook, which we're going to show more of next month, but I am going to show at least a brief part of it so that we can visualize what's going on here. So if I see improve work and I go over to our improve work workspace that was included in this lab, I can go ahead and create a new issue. Give it some description. The coffee maker is broken. Save this record. And I can see that the workspace admin has added a Playbook tab up to this related item of this form. They've configured Playbook to be embedded in this form. If we switch over to it, we can see the Playbook itself. Now, in this case, the Playbook is being rendered as a accordion. The top level of the accordion corresponds to the lanes in that process. We can see the analysis lane is in progress. The first activity within there is an introduction. Here is that activity represented as a card within Playbook. We have a title, we have a tagline, we have an icon, we have a little indicator that's in progress, and we have the actual instructions. How this is configured, again, we'll show next month. But for the sake of this demo, we're going to go ahead and mark that as complete. It's going to move to the next step and ask us to fill in the issue type. Now, I could just fill in the issue type from details here. I could fill in the issue type from the platform forms and list. But instead, we don't have to go anywhere. All the information we need is right here in front of us. So I'm going to fill in the issue, provide some location, save it. Now, because it has an issue type, it finishes, goes on to the next lane. And we can see it skipped right through the first activity in that lane, the create IW task, because that was an automated step. There was nothing for us to do. We can still expand it and see what was done, but we're going to go for our next task here, waiting for this task to be completed. So here, we're waiting for Able to go and complete this task. Whenever that's done, this will automatically complete. We even have a link to go and view this task and a new tab to see what it's waiting on. We could complete it ourselves. But let's go ahead and just see what Able would see if we impersonated him. Now, because we are the user who's assigned to this, we actually have a one-click button where we could close it directly without having to leave the playbook at all, without having to open up a new workspace tab. If we closed it, it would move on to the next step. That's just a small preview of how configurable this user interface actually is. Let's switch back to our admin. And we can wait for some close notes. The coffee maker is fixed. Now that work notes have been provided, close notes rather, and you can see this is updating in real time. The close notes have been filled in. The task that was created is marked as done. Everything that you would imagine is done is being completed. We have another instruction telling us to let the requester know that everything's been done and accept the solution. Hey, I hit him up on Slack. It's all good. That's complete. The automated task has now finished as well, and it's gone and closed that record. Pretty simple example. Now, what I'd like to show, I'm going to kick off another one and show some of the tables that are going on behind the scenes to show some of the flexibility here. So let's just kick off another one. Now, this first card doesn't look like it's a record, right? There's no issue attached. There's no record number. There's no assigned to that you can see here, but everything is a record because when we click mark complete or skip, we need something to be updated for this to move on. We're not calling a pad API specifically. We're just updating records. And that's a big thing to understand with working in pad is that records are the units of all the work. So if I go back to my platform UI and I type in process automation again, under process automation administration, that's a mouthful. If we go to today's executions and we open up this one that's running now, we can see that this introduction card is in progress and it has an associated record with it. This is a flow data record. I'm going to open up that in a new tab. Flow data records are a really powerful table and record that we use throughout PAD and Flow Designer as well. It's a way to collect any arbitrary information from a user to use within the flow. So that you want to call some API within the flow and you need some message or title or something from the user that you want to collect. You could create a table just to collect that information, but you'd quickly end up with a whole lot of tables. Instead, you can create a data definition. A data definition will define what data I want to collect. And then when this flow data step is marked as complete, the flow can actually go and proceed and use it, which will make sense in a moment when I show an example. The most basic data definition is a manual activity. In this case, there's actually no information you need to collect from the user at all. You're just waiting for them to say that the state is done. So when we talk about Playbook next month, we're going to go over these declarative actions that can be configured to run server scripts. They're very similar to UI actions. And you'd see that this mark complete button, all it's doing is changing the state of this flow data record to complete. If I actually go and change it to complete here manually, we could see it magically just goes on to the next step. Now, one of the big takeaways here is you don't need Playbook. You could actually go through forms and lists, update these records, mark them as complete. But what fun would that be? Now, let's go ahead and show an example of using that flow data record to do something more powerful, because this is a pretty straightforward, basic example. Say we want to send a Slack message as part of this process. So let's jump into Flow Designer first to do the work. Now I'm going to jump over to subflows, and I went and created this ahead of time, given the time constraint. Now this subflow is going to take in a reference to a task record. You're going to take in a record, a channel that you want to post to on Slack. And it does a few different things here. First thing first, it's going to create a flow data to collect some info from the user. Now, its data definition you can see here is a Slack message. So you can always create new data definitions by going to sysflow data definition and create a new one. I created one for this demo called Slack message. Call it Slack message, and here is where you define the data variables that you want to collect in order to do some work. So I added a new variable called message of type string. because that's what we want the agent to provide to us. Back in Flow Designer world, we can see that, okay, we have this create flow data step. It's going to create a new flow data record with a data definition of Slack message. Now we have this assign to field. As I showed before, the moment I clicked complete on this, this moved forward. And in fact, if I went and created a new one and chose that Slack message and hit save, we'd see the message field that's waiting on. Anyone could just go and fill in a message here, mark it as complete, and go and send that Slack message. We want some permissions over this. So that's where assignment group and assign to comes in. You can specify a specific user or a specific assignment group that has the permissions to actually complete this task and do the work. So I'm going to use the pill picker and say, you know what, the only one who can actually submit this message is going to be the one who is assigned to the task record that was passed in. I could do assignment group as well. The next step is a wait for condition. We're going to wait for that flow data record to be complete, skipped, errored, canceled. Wait for it to be done, essentially. And now we have a little fork in the road. If that state is complete, meaning they do want to actually send this message, nothing went wrong, the process wasn't canceled, the agent didn't decide to skip this step, now we're going to post the message. And you can see here, I'm just posting to a demo webhook URL that I set up for this. Let me actually open up Slack for that to work. And for the actual message, well, you can see skipping ahead to the channel comes from the inputs as well. For the message, we had to write some scriptable functionality here. In the future, we're expanding pill pickers to work with these data definitions, but within Paris, you do have to use a scriptable interface for that. So we can see we're going to return new task has been created. We're going to access the subflow inputs, access the task and its number, put that in the message, but then we're going to actually add the message that was collected. The syntax here is, we're going to get access. Now, you do get a telesense here, so you don't have to memorize this. When you type in dot, you can see the previous steps. So we're going to access that first step where the create flow data record was created. We're going to then dot walk into the record that was created as part of it. This is the one piece that you do. Actually, you'd see this in here as well. You see vars, but it is something to remember. That's where we get the variables, and then you access the actual variable that you defined in the data definition. That won't come up in IntelliSense. You're going to have to just actually look it up based off of the definition that you created. Again, that was right here. We called it message. So that's going to append the message into the Slack message. And that's it. Now we could go and test this. Let's go and choose any random record. Now the channel that I have set up for this webhook, I called it Sandbox, and we're just going to run it. Now I didn't get any message yet because we haven't provided the message yet. But if we view the flow execution, we can see after this create flow data step, it created a flow data record. And here it's assigned to some ITIL user. The state is pending, the message is blank. I'm going to go ahead, mark this as complete, save it. And there we go. A new task has been created. And there's the number. Here's the message. Now we're going to encapsulate that flow logic that we just did in a reusable activity definition. So under process automation, under administration, we're going to go to activity definitions and hit new. Call it send the Slack message. It can run, in this case, it does, what can be the thing that kicked it off can be anything. Flow or action, okay. Let's choose flow. And let's choose the Slack flow that we just created. And we'll hit save. Here we can see the inputs from that flow. The task will let the process owner specify, but the channel we're going to go and specify for them. So this will be pre-filled. Now we do need to configure this for the Playbook experience so that the user will actually see a message and something meaningful. I'm just going to fill up this activity experience tab real quick, but we're going to explain everything I'm doing in next month's session. So I'm going to say that this should be represented as a record. I'm going to set the associated table to that flow data. Use a pill picker to map it to the outputs of that flow. You can access every step within the flow. Tie it to that record. Put in a little tagline. I'll say, and then specify that we want the form fields to be those vars. I think that should be everything. And now we're going to jump back into Process Automation Designer. And jump into that process. And let's do it right after they fill in an issue type. When I type in Slack, we'll see that send a Slack message that we just created. And if we configure this activity, we can see, okay, which task is this assigned to? Let's use the pill picker to map it to that parent task. Channel is all good, all filled out. And we can go ahead and update this and activate. Now let's go back into Workspace and kick off another process. We'll go ahead and mark this as complete. Fill in an issue type. And now we have a new send a Slack message activity waiting to load. And here we go, enter a Slack message to post to the channel notification from the Slack message, and we can put in a message. And we'll hit send. And right away, new task has been created. The number, I don't know what went wrong. Not the most helpful of messages, but either way it works. So I hope you can see just how powerful this can be. These were still relatively simple examples of allowing you to package up really complicated logic within the flow, encapsulate it into a very easy to understand activity definition, and then use that activity definition in a drag and drop manner as a process owner. One thing to keep in mind here is that we don't want to replace Flow Designer. So you don't want to have a million activities that can do everything and anything like you see in Integration Hub. You want to have really business-specific use cases that solve something very specific. Fill issue type would be a perfect example. Now, these examples were actually powered by a wait for condition, activity definition, but what we usually recommend is to actually even encapsulate this conditional logic into its own activity definition. Hide that from the user. If it's called filled issue type, the process owner doesn't have to specify what the issue type they're waiting for and what the table is. They should really just see a pill picker here called issue type, and they can issue, and they can map it to the parent record, and that's it. So it's really designed to have very specific use cases. So I'm gonna finish my screen share here, and then some of the key features we showed. This is a no-code process authoring experience to model an enterprise workflow. We are able to coordinate manual, automated, and integration process activities. There's support for parallel and sequential processes. You have data flow. You can pass data between process activities using the no-code data picker. And we've integrated low-code flow designer for extensible workflow automation. And it's important to recognize that this is on the Now platform. So you can extend it with everything the platform can do, from service level management to performance analytics to machine learning. And we haven't even gotten to how flexible and configurable Playbook itself is. Some things to keep in mind: this does not replace Flow Designer. Before those barrage of questions come in, Flow Designer is not going away. There's a lot of active development on it. This is meant to encapsulate Flow Designer, to make it more accessible for process owners who don't have to have strong developer acumen. It's designed to solve specific business use cases, as opposed to anything and everything. And it's compatible with playbooks, so it can allow users who are fulfilling these requests and working on these processes to never have to leave anything, to not have to navigate through forms and lists to get their work done. And one of the powers there is that not only does it allow them to not have to leave the playbook to do all of their work, but we are able to pick data out of that flow in real time through those pill pickers that we showed before. As the flow is moving on, the UI can update regularly. This really enables a lot of powerful flexibility. You can have wizards as the form is regularly changing based on input from the user. Again, we'll get into more of that next month. Out of the box, we don't ship a whole ton of reusable activity definitions because we want them to be really use case specific. However, there is use case specific content for ITSM and CSM content available today in the ServiceNow store. If you are building custom applications and you do want to build processes around those custom applications, you do need an App Engine license, an App Engine entitlement. Process Automation Designer and Playbook itself are free. They come with every instance, but the licensing is controlled based on the tables that you're working on. There's a lot of development coming came in Paris, coming beyond in Quebec. The ability to cancel a process once it's been running, the ability to manually trigger a process based on some user action rather than some update record, a much nicer enhanced UI, lane conditions. I didn't actually talk about activity conditions, but that's another powerful feature. You can configure on any activity, switch to an advanced view, and you can say only run this activity when these conditions are met. And those conditions can come from previous activities. And until those conditions are met, you don't even see the activity in the front end. So for example, you could have 5 steps in a lane, and the 4 subsequent ones all depend on the inputs of the first one. And based on the action that the agent takes in the first one, only one of those 4 might show up. So you can kind of build forking type of logic using that power. That same condition is going to be extended to lanes in the future. The ability to do ad hoc activities based off of user interaction. So actually from a front end, some user interacting with this in Playbook could actually add activities to a running process in real time. And additional start rules beyond that. These are all the features that we are planning on delivering if things go well. That is it for me. I'm going to hand it back over to Chuck.
I want to remind you that there is a related workshop to this. Starting today, we are launching the CreatorCon on-demand content, October 20th through the end of 2020. So we've got a little bit of time. But the real fun is in doing these workshops this week. There's some new content there, including Process Automation Designer, CCW 1001. You should, if you're watching this live, you should have a link in your resources panel. If not, go to the developer site. You look for CCW 1001. In fact, I just Googled it and it came up. It's like, there's only one instance of CCW 1001 on the internet, apparently. So it'll get you to the developer portal and you can launch that. Lisa has done a wonderful job building out this hands-on workshop. Follow along. And then I invite you to attend CreatorCon next week. Just go to our main site under events. You'll see CreatorCon. You can register, totally free, half-day event with keynotes and a look into the future. You get some sneak peeks at what's coming in Quebec. You'll get some, it's wonderful. We're keeping it short. We learned a lot from doing knowledge back in May, and we're taking that forward. So mark your calendars, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Pacific time. I don't know what that is in your time zone, but apologize if it's ungodly hours or whatever deity you pray to. We're going to make sure that this is available on demand afterwards in case you can't make it. So let's also remind you that there are a whole bunch of resources available. The doc site, the developer portal, the community. We've been doing this for a long time. We can now change this to over 80 topics. And I want to get through that because we do have a number of questions, and I'm really curious to know what Yaron has to say to the live Q&A that's come in. I've saved up a couple of good ones for you here, so let me pull that up. I'm going to take these in the order they came in, just to be fair. Are the activities in process automation in any way related to the service catalog / RITMs? How does someone initiate one of these flows?
They are not directly related to anything within Service Catalog, but they can be. They use any table that you want to, can power any of these activities. You can have any associated record. You can provide forms on any of those records as well. So you can have any conditions waiting on something to be done, whether it's a service catalog or whether it's anything else. But there's, off the top of my head, I can't think of any specific flow that would be incompatible with this.
Okay. Let's see. I think you talked about this towards the end when you talked about licensing. Does the BPA features demoed fall under ITSM Pro with the Paris upgrade, or are there additional subscription fees? I think the answer was it comes with the platform. It's like the workflow engine. However, if you want to do the custom tables and custom applications, you're going to need the AES plugin, which does have a cost associated with it. So always talk to your account team if you've got licensing questions and you want to understand that further. There were a few people in there. There was also a number of questions about exposing Playbook to Service Portal. Any thoughts if that's on the roadmap at somewhere? Because there were more than a few requests about using it outside of Workspace. I know we'll get to that.
So we have this new Now UX framework that's powering Workspace and is also powering the new UI Builder, drag and drop builder. In Quebec, we are actually launching a version of Workspace for CSM that was entirely rebuilt using UI Builder, this drag and drop builder experience. And Portal is replacing Service Portal as well. Well, not replacing, but being an addition to the new modern version of that. So any place, any application that supports these new Now UI UX components can support a playbook in the future. So in Paris, the only place that this can actually work in Paris is within Workspace. In Quebec and beyond, any custom page built with UI Builder, including the new portal, will use it. It will not be compatible with Service Portal. Service Portal at this point is running on legacy technology using Angular, so it's not compatible. Now, it would be conceivable to create a wrapper that displays Playbook within Service Portal if there's enough demand. But that would be more a question for a product team to decide based off of customer input.
Or some
So short answer, yeah, exactly. So short answer is no, it does not work in Service Portal today. It will work in the new modern portal that is going to be replacing it tomorrow.
Okay. Good idea. Good idea. Let's see. Is there conditional? You mentioned the branching and the forking, the possibility of running one of these 4 activities. Is there conditional starting of lanes?
Not in Paris. So a lane will only start after previous immediately or with previous. In future releases, though, it is on the roadmap. That feature is on its way.
And that's kind of a follow-on to this next question. What if I would create a process automation on an incident, but the agent opts to resolve the incident outside the prescribed process? Will the playbook close the moment the incident has been completed or resolved? Does it catch up, or
yes.
Is it just going to... Oh, sweet.
Yeah, a resounding yes. That is something that we definitely wanted to keep everything decoupled. No one is required to use Playbook to do the work. You can update the incident in mobile, in the legacy UI, in Workspace, Portal, whatever. The moment that record is marked complete, whatever's waiting on it to complete will finish.
For that, you get one of these. There you go.
Right. A gold coin.
Could you provide an example of what business use case this process automation designer would be used for? When would we use this process automation designer versus flow designer versus workflow editor? Oh, good question, because they hit the whole family.
Sure. So workflows is at this point is considered legacy. It's always going to be supported, but we're not recommending anyone continue to build new workflows and workflow. Flow Designer is the replacement for that. Flow Designer, however, does take some developer skill to really understand. It is low code, but it's not no code. And it can do really anything and everything. Process Automation Designer is an abstraction. It sits on top of Flow Designer. The distinction between when you use one versus the other, it really comes down to who the role is, who the persona is. If you are a process owner or you are working with a process owner who is either intimidated by Flow Designer or just not super comfortable with that environment and thinks more in terms of lanes, Process Automation Designer is a much better fit. You can, as a developer, you can pre-build these reusable activity definitions for that process owner to use and to wire these up without having really any understanding of what's going on beneath the surface. The other advantage to using Process Automation Designer, even if you are a developer, is that UI, that Playbook experience UI, the ability to pull out data from that process as it is running in real time and represent that user, the information to a user in a unified interface without them having to dig around through forms and lists is a huge power of Process Automation Designer, and you don't have that functionality within Flow Designer. Flow Designer is really meant for more of these automated processes. So in terms of the business use case, it really comes down to any time you have these cross-enterprise processes, these complicated processes involving a lot of different players that you want the process owner to be able to manage and run themselves without having to bring in a developer.
Are there any out-of-box reports or dashboards to help track the activities or particularly how much time is spent in each one so we can see where the bottlenecks are?
Sure, no, great question. All these executions are running in those tables. I showed them a little bit. If you go under Process Automation and then Process Administration, you can see the records that are representing all the different activities and all the different lanes and all the different processes when they were created, and it'll have the whole history in there. So you can either navigate that through forms and lists, or you can create a custom report that's on top of that. We've already had some customers who've been using this already create some meaningful reports on top of that data. So it's definitely possible. In the future, we do plan on adding something, more of an interface on top of that to make that easier to see yourself, maybe something akin to what you see in Flow executions.
All right. One more. I think we've got time for one more question. This one's a little long in the reading. Hopefully it's a quick answer in the back end. What is the engine behind the scenes that PAD uses and to process and determine when to run its flows? Is it entirely built off of Flow, or does it use its own engine and tables behind the scenes and then simply calls flows when conditions are met?
That is a great question. I'm not 100% certain, but I'd say 90% certain it is its own engine. It does kick off those actual flows. So the engine itself, I'm fairly certain, is not like some parent flow that's orchestrating everything. It's more of an engine itself, and that engine will go and navigate through these tables, these process definition tables, create the process definition context, fire off the activity context, and fire off Flow Designer to do the actual work. But again, only 90% sure of that.
Okay. Well, I'll take 90% of your answer versus 100% of mine.
Right.
Yeah, I do. I manage the Playbook team, so I know every little detail about Playbook, but in terms of the engineering implementations of PAD, less so.
All right. Good segue, because I want everybody to mark their calendars for November 17th, same time. It's a Tuesday, 8 a.m. Pacific, for the Playbook follow-up to this webinar. And with that, huge thanks to Craig Stepp for behind the scenes answering questions, keeping things running, keeping me honest. Thank you, Yarn, for all of your subject matter expertise and the demos that you were able to show here. And thank you, everybody, for watching this. To answer the common question, yes, it will be made available on demand. Watch for that information shortly. It's also, if you go over to bit.ly/ServiceNow-TechNow, you'll find the community article with all of the TechNow episodes. And this one will be number 80. You can watch it. I'll have it post-production and all the answers and questions and everything in a couple of days. So give us a little bit of time to wrap that up, and we will see you back here real soon Thank you, everyone, for joining. Bye.